Hi, this is Larry Slagle with another executive session of Maslin Magazine. I'm here today with Ken Harbaugh, the Democratic candidate for the 7th Congressional District in Ohio. How you doing, Ken?
Doing good, Larry. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm always happy to have people on the show that are working hard to become the next congressman in the 7th Congressional District.
That's right.
How's the campaign going?
It's going incredibly well. We got problems today we would have killed 3 months ago, which is, I think, a sign of success.
Well, that is a sign of success. And let's talk a little bit about the 7th Congressional District in Ohio, because it's kind of a strange district, isn't it?
It looks strange on paper because of what Columbus tried to do in terms of gerrymandering. But I tell you what, one of the distinguishing characteristics of a district like this that starts all the way up in Lorain County, where I'm from, goes down to Knox County, back up to Tuscarawas, and Stark County has all of Canton in it. This is a district that takes work. You got to get out there. You got to put some effort in to meet the voters, to build the kind of coalition, and we're doing it. We realized that we had accidentally, in the first 7 months of this campaign, done more events in my opponent's home county than he has in 7 years. I remember banging on the dash of my truck when the change oil light came on, thinking this thing's broken. Turned over to Tom, and he said, "No, we've been doing 1,500 miles a week, and that's how you got to do it. That's the job."
And when did you start this campaigning?
Well, I had a gut feeling during the 2016 election cycle that something wasn't right in my country that I'd fought for, that buddies of mine had died for. And I decided after that election cycle that, look, unless good people from outside the system who put country over party get into the fight, we're going to keep getting the same thing. And I think we've got a Congress today that cannot do its job. And unless we change that, we're going to keep getting more of the same.
So as you've knocked on the doors in the 7th Congressional District, what are the 3 things that you found out that you feel the voters want to hear you say you're going to address?
The top 3 issues in this district are healthcare, and healthcare, especially when you dovetail the opioid epidemic with that. These are life and death issues that folks across the district are facing. I felt that in my gut when we started this out, but in every conversation I've had on doorsteps and driveways, that's been validated. And so we're running a campaign that is listening to the voter on that issue, that is also channeling my own experience as the father of a little girl who needed 4 surgeries before she turned 4 years old.
Wow. So this is going to be a difficult question to ask you, but how do you see any changes coming in the healthcare system that you as a congressional, when you become a congressman in November of this year, what do you see as you can do to help change this problem?
I'm not going to do it alone. I'm not naive. I think what we've got to do in 2018, and we have a chance to do this as a country, as Ohioans, is change Congress, is send representatives who are going to listen to the people, who are going to hold town halls and show up for work, and are going to do their fundamental duty to represent. You're called a representative for a reason. And I think that's step 1, is acknowledging that there is something fundamentally broken in our political system, in the way we send representatives who seem to answer to the party before they answer to their constituents, before they serve the country. So the first reaction to your question is, if it's just me, it's not going to happen. But I think something extraordinary is going on in this country in 2018. When you look at the types of candidates who are running, I got a dozen military buddies who never saw themselves in the political arena before. They're coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're saying, look, the path our country is headed down is not the path that I envision. It's not the country I fought for. We're going to fight here at home.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your background that makes you feel you've been prepared to be a U.S. congressman. Let's talk about your education, your military service, your employment history.
The first thing that I'd answer with is the oath of office I took as a 22-year-old, which wasn't to a party. It wasn't to a president or a particular office. I swore as a 22-year-old upon joining the U.S. Navy, eventually to fly combat recon missions, that I would support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies. Coincidentally, it's the same oath on paper that Representative Sagan. You want to get that?
No. Sorry about the interruption. It was not Bob Gibbs, although Mr. Gibbs, you are welcome to come on the show if you'd like. But let's talk about it, because a lot of what sets people up to be a good representative is based on their background.
Sure.
So, talk about the background. I understand you lived in several foreign countries because you were a military brat.
I grew up on military bases all over the world. I remember going to work with my dad one day on one of those take your kid to the office days. Mm-hmm. Except in my dad's case, his office was a bunker, 100 feet underground, deep inside Germany. And on that day, they were executing a nuclear missile attack drill, simulating an attack by the Russians against this air base. And my dad's job he was a Phantom pilot. His job as the vice wing commander of that squadron was to get those reconnaissance planes up in the air. He had 9 minutes. I remember the organized chaos of being in this bunker deep inside Germany as the pilots scrambled, as they lit off the engines and got up in the air. And then I remember an eerie calm after those 9 minutes were up. And I turned to my dad. I was 10 years old at the time. I turned to my dad and I said, "What now?" And I remember the words of his answer, but the meaning didn't sink in until years later. I asked him, "What now?" And he said, "Son, now we wait." And what he meant was, now we wait to die.
Wow.
Because we have done our job.
Right.
And the missiles are inbound, and even 100 feet of earth and concrete is not going to protect us from a nuclear blast.
Now, this wasn't reality, though.
No, this was a drill.
Preparing
this
for
was
reality.
preparing for a nuclear
hopefully
war.
never happen in a reality.
That will hopefully never happen, but it made me realize from a very early age that America needs its defenders. And when we eventually got back to the States, I about 2/3 of the way through college realized that I needed to do my part.
And college was where?
College was at Duke University. Okay. Which I paid for myself. I didn't come from a lot of money, but it was actually summer after my junior year, I realized, you know what? I haven't done anything to deserve the privileges I was enjoying as an American. And I walked into the recruiter's office and said, "I want to be a U.S. Navy pilot."
And you became a pilot,
I became a pilot.
What'd you fly?
I flew an aircraft called the EP-3. It's a signals intelligence combat reconnaissance aircraft. I graduated top of my class from advanced flight training and decided, I want to go fly real-world missions. This was in the late 90s, and I picked EP-3s. Most of my missions were over the Middle East and off of North Korea and in the Western Pacific.
Wow. And after military service, you were in for 8 years?
After military service, I did 9 years.
9 years.
Went back to school and ended up becoming an advocate for veterans, and that led me to the presidency of Team Rubicon Global, which is an organization that retrains military vets from now around the world, but initially U.S. military vets coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan to deploy into disaster zones. So we sent teams to the Philippines after Typhoon Haiyan. One of my more recent missions was to camps for people displaced by ISIS. On that mission to the Philippines, it really drove home for me the value of bringing together people who are mission-driven, who didn't care about politics, didn't care about personalities or background. Our goal in responding to that typhoon was to set up a medical clinic and to deliver aid to a population that wasn't getting any. They were absolutely hammered by the worst typhoon in human history at that point.
And how long did you serve in that job with Rubicon?
I served with Rubicon for 4 years and stepped down to run for Congress, which you ask my buddies and they'll say, "Why would you give
what's wrong
that
with
up?"
you? Right.
Right.
You have other education beyond Duke University, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And what is that?
After I got out of the Navy, actually for me the decision came looking at my 2-week-old daughter and I had just finished a teaching tour as my last tour in the Navy, and looked at Katie and realized that it was my probably the toughest decision of my professional career to either redeploy as a Navy pilot and leave my 2-week-old daughter, or go back and get an education. And so I went back to school, went to Yale Law School with Katie in tow, and ended up from Yale Law School going into the veterans work that led me to team.
That's interesting. And you're married.
I am.
Your wife's name?
Anne Marie.
You're the light of your life?
Light of my life, born and raised in Medina County. We got married at St. Francis and baptized the kids there. The kids are 5th generation Ohioans.
Wow. And Medina, she went to Medina High School
She
then?
went to Medina High. Her dad taught history there for 38 years.
And what was her maiden name? People might want to
Kelly.
know.
Anne Marie Kelly Harbaugh.
Kelly. Okay.
That's right. John Kelly is a Hall of Famer in the Medina County Hall of Fame. Yep.
Well, that's her father, I guess.
That's her dad.
All right. Now, you talked about the healthcare crisis. How do you see any substantive changes coming around? I mean, that seems to be the most chaotic thing going on in Congress right now.
Sure.
Obamacare is derided, although it was originally a Republican concept. So it's kind of.
Yeah.
So how do you see changing it with this, or do you think it's going to?
In terms of substantive solutions, there are things we could do that would, I think, garner bipartisan support fairly quickly if we could simply reach across the aisle and work together. To me, the first thing that we have to do is shore up the exchanges, fully fund the exchanges. And we know there are folks on the other side of the aisle who want to do that. We can allow Medicare buy-in for older Americans who aren't yet at the Medicare eligibility age. We have to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices.
Right.
There are some basic things that we can get the other side's buy-in on if we would just get over the politics. I like to tell folks all around the district that if I can sit across the table from an Afghan warlord, which I've done, I can work with anybody. My parents are Republicans, and we break bread all the time. This shouldn't be that hard, but party politics has gotten in the way.
So what made you decide to run as a Democrat?
What made me decide to run as a Democrat was healthcare, was Lizzie, and seeing that we have to win this fundamental argument. And if we don't, someone like my daughter, who has a pre-existing condition, is going to be uninsurable until she's 65 and can go on Medicare. That is fundamentally unfair. We're the richest country on earth. I can't tell you how many times I talk to people across the district who have stories even tougher than that. I talked to a woman. Go ahead.
But how are you going to, when you talk to these people, I mean,
Sure.
many of these people actually voted for candidates that wanted to get rid of Obamacare, which was the insurance that they had. How are you going to be able to convince them that that really probably wasn't a good idea?
Well, I think there's been a failure of leadership on both sides.
Okay.
From both parties. And running as a Democrat, I got no problem calling out the Democratic Party for its failures to talk to people face to face in their driveways, on their doorsteps. And instead of communicating with multi-million-dollar ad buys and Facebook ads and that kind of approach, we got to get back to the hard work of democracy, which is talking to people face to face and knocking on doors. When I have those conversations on doorsteps, we convince them.
And what is the basic concern of those people on those doorsteps about health care? Having it, or having it but not getting the treatment they need, or not even being able to get health care to begin with?
It runs the gamut. It's access, it's affordability. You put those two complaints together, and that's probably 90% of the issues I hear about. And then you talk to employers who find it prohibitively expensive. I had a conversation with a woman outside of Mansfield, as a matter of fact. We hit it off right away. She was a Marine, corpsman during the first Gulf War era. Corpsman is a medic, a Marine Corps medic. So, we got along right away, and this conversation happened in a driveway, not on a doorstep, because she was unloading groceries. I gave her a hand, And she talked about her time as a corpsman in the Marine Corps, was incredibly proud of what she'd done. And then she came home and started a home healthcare business with a dozen nurses. She went back to school, got her LPN, her nurse's degree, and built this home healthcare business from scratch. Just as proud of that as she was of her time in uniform. But when we started to talk about healthcare, she teared up. And she said, I can barely afford it for me and my 4 kids. She was a single mom. When you talk about the 12 nurses that I employ, and remember, these are folks who spend every waking moment in other people's homes, taking care of them. Of her 12, 8 of them, because she can't afford it for her company, 8 of them have no health insurance of their own. They spend every waking moment taking care of others. They come home, they can't take care of their own families. We're the richest country on earth. That's an excuse.
Where are you going to go for ideas or concepts to help convince others that we need to get together and deal with the healthcare issue? Because there are some people that believe government shouldn't be involved in healthcare.
Where am I going to go for ideas?
Yes.
To the voters of the Ohio 7th. I'm going to talk to...
Well, that's the ideas of them needing the healthcare.
Sure.
But in terms of getting them affordable and quality health care, there's got to be better. I mean, every other civilized country has some sort of health care system that apparently works.
You're right.
So there have to be ideas out there that you've actually had the advantage of living in those countries to know what your friends dealt with who were not on the American base.
I grew up as a military brat in countries all over the world. I also, shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, grew up in the DoD healthcare system. I get my healthcare now from the VA. There are examples we can look to for inspiration. There are examples that work. We have to reject this false choice between a healthcare system that works for everyone and that is somehow a betrayal of American ideals. I think that it is a canard. It's intended to divide us. We can figure this out as a country if we get above the partisanship. And those 3 initial ideas I laid out are concrete examples that can begin to get us there.
Now, we can talk about health care probably for hours.
Sure.
And not cover just a little molehill of the mountain that we'd have to deal with. Any other issues that while walking the district you've found to be of concern to the voters?
Absolutely. The opioid epidemic.
The
opioid epidemic is... Ground zero is here in Ohio nationally, and the Ohio 7th is one of the worst districts in the state. I had a conversation with a mom who came up and said, Ken, you got to win this one. You have to win because I just buried my only son. He was on a waiting list for 3 months for a bed in a treatment facility because we were told there was no money. And she's not wrong. The president declared an emergency and put no additional funding behind that declaration. And 2 weeks shy of getting his slot at this treatment facility, her son overdosed.
Wow.
And then you look at a county like Stark, the most populous county in the district, and it is out of control. The deputy coroner came up to me and said they just had to rent a freezer truck to handle the overflow at the morgue.
And how do you see your role in dealing with that crisis?
First step is leadership, and calling it what it is, identifying it for what it really is. And as someone with a disaster relief background, I can argue with some authority that this law enforcement only approach is incredibly misguided. Yet we seem to have a mindset coming out of this administration and some of its cheerleaders that you get the impression the only tool in their toolkit is a hammer. Every problem they see looks like a nail, and they want to reignite the war on drugs, which is not going to work. Right along with any sheriff in the district, with any deputy in the district, and they will tell you, if you're on the front lines actually listening, they will tell you we cannot arrest our way out of this problem. We need a multi-pronged approach. We need law enforcement, but we also need treatment. We need to invest in those beds.
Yeah, it's a rare person who actually wants to be addicted.
No one wants to be a heroin addict. 2/3 of the addictions in this district started with a prescription. That should
because
prove the
they're
point.
trained dealing with pain.
That's right. That's right.
Any other third issue or anything you're thinking of that you've talked to the voters about that they have concerns?
Sure. And this is one where I also feel an obligation to lead. And I'm incredibly proud of my neighbors and humbled by their thoughts on this and their willingness to think deeply about our posture towards the rest of the world. And I think that's in a lot of cases because of North Korea, because people are terrified about how we're going to react to North Korean provocations, how we might be unnecessarily provoking North Korea. And as someone who has led more missions than I can count off of North Korea, I think folks are looking for a little wisdom, a little leadership, frankly, a little discipline in our approach to some of these life and death issues around the world. We have life and death issues right at home, but as a global leader, we're also at the front lines of these life and death issues around the world.
Well, it sounds like you're getting a good pulse for the district.
We are.
And you're working hard to get there.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you have 10 months to go.
That's right.
A little bit less than 10 months. I hope you'll come back to the program.
Would love to.
We try to keep these a little bit less detailed than you might do in some, because we're just trying to introduce the candidates, but we'd like to explore further with you about
Great.
your solutions to the problems that are facing the 7th Congressional District in the state of Ohio
You got it.
for the U.S. Congress.
Would love to come back, Larry.
All right,
Thanks
well,
for having me.
Thank you, Ken. It was very
You bet.
nice talking to you.
Likewise.
This has been Larry Slagle with Ken Harbaugh, who's the 7th Congressional District Democratic candidate for U.S. Congress. And he'll be on the ballot in November 6th,
November 6th,
2018. So, this is Larry Slagle, and I'll see you next time.